Hi, dear friends. Um, we welcome you to our online tour. And finally, we managed to go live. For those of you who know us, we are sending our greetings from Moscow. And for those of you who don't know us, we are actually ready to present ourselves. So we are Katya and Nikita. Nikita is just behind here. He's going to answer your questions.
Hi.
And we are tour guides in Moscow. We do tours for 2 years now, and we are also art historians graduated from St. Petersburg. And actually, we are ready to do a lot of the live streams and excursions, and you are welcome with suggestions. We can do something about Petersburg as well and other Russian towns. So now we are ready to start. I hope everyone who wanted to join us already joined. And let's go to Moscow. We are now standing at near the Manege, right in front of the Kremlin. You can see here the tower, the entrance tower to Kremlin. You see the line here of the people who got their tickets and they are ready to enter. And you can see the Kremlin towers right here. This tower in front of us, it's called the Kutafya. It's, if you translate it from Russian, it's a strange name. It's called the clumsy woman. And you will see that if you compare it to the rest of the Kremlin towers, one of them you can see here, basically it really looks strange. It's too small and too round. And this is for the special purpose. It was for the fortification. And actually, it's not a part of the Kremlin. It was just the place where the guards were defending the Kremlin from the enemies. If we go to our beautiful view, the bird eye view, you can see the place where we met. We've chosen this for the reason that basically it was always the border between the Kremlin walls, where the royals lived, or the invited guests, and the rest of the town. You see, it's the center of the city. And normally, Moscow map, if you look, for example, at the Google Maps, it's the round map. If you know, tell us in comments the other cities which have the same planning, the round planning, because you have the circle number 1, circle number 2, circle number 3, and lots of them actually. That can be complicated a little bit. But why is it so? Because of the origins. The city is based around the Kremlin. And you can see that this was always like that from the earlier days of the Kremlin. You will see it if we go back to our part, and I will show you the medieval part of the Moscow. Right here. Plenty of pictures. So that's where we met. Remember our meeting point right here. We have the red arrow, and around the red dots, this is basically the Kremlin. And on the medieval picture, you can also see that there were other walls. For example, the Chinatown Kitai Gorod, or the White Wall, where the merchants and wealthy people were living. So the closer you were to the Kremlin, which was the place for the royals, the wealthier you were. Then we had one more wall. So actually it's the third level of fortification. This was called the Earth Wall, the Earth City. And that's where the peasants lived. You can see lots of gardens here. Basically, they were producing the products for the Kremlin. They had a lot of fruits and vegetables, especially on that side, because here we have the Moscow River. And Kremlin has a super interesting position, surrounded by the natural rivers used as moats. And you can see here, one of the rivers, it was called Niglinne. Actually, it still exists, but we'll talk about it later. And this river is Moscow River that you can still see nowadays. So that part of the town that you can see, it was not very comfortable to stay there because it was always flooded. That gave very good fertility to the land, on the other hand, and that's why sometimes they even called it paradise gardens. So that's the name of the part of the land where now we have the chocolate factory, actually, the former Red October. So now we are going back to our map. And finally, we are ready to go down to the Alexander's Garden. That's where normally we buy the tickets to go to the Kremlin. You can see here the ticket office and the walls of the Kremlin. One of the towers, Trinity Tower, now it looks like it's under reconstruction because it's 2012, I think. So it's 8 years ago. You can see the bridge here and the river Niglinne that we just discussed. It's underground, it still exists. They have the collectors. Sometimes we have the diggers who are going there and trying to explore the underground Moscow. And you see these parts, now they have bricks, but before you could actually go through it because it was the river. So a few more words about the Kutafia that we can see over here, connected with the bridge. Actually, when it was the part of the fortification, you can see that lots and lots of the guards were fighting there, and even it's depicted on the famous painting here. Let's have a look. We have the Polish invading Russia after the Ivan the Terrible's death. And you can see here the Kutafia Tower, which is now red and white color. You can see the Trinity Tower and the river right here. So the purpose of this tower was basically to have the good observation, because you can see that here we have angles, and through these angles you cannot see where the enemies are coming. And Kutafia, it's like a platform where the guards could come and fire the guns. So basically you can see here that it was quite a good part of the fortification. It helped Moscow to withstand all of the fights. And actually the information, the history says that Moscow was never taken by the enemies. It happened only once when Napoleon came, but actually Moscow was already empty. Our general decided just to leave it and to save the lives of the soldiers. So it was a part of the tactics that actually worked, and we will talk about it later when we see the trophies from the Napoleon. Going back and going up the bridge, we will appear right near the tower. So probably let's go back a bit to see how it looks from the outside. Yeah, here we have the Trinity Tower. Actually, now it's the interesting place. They have the base for the training for the Moscow Orchestra, for the Kremlin Orchestra. So before it was a prison, a monastery, they had quite a lot of the functionalities, all of the towers, but now it's just for the orchestra. Quite interesting thing. If you look again from the bird eye view to our beautiful Kremlin, you can see that all the towers, they have different form. They have square ones, round ones, and the small ones. In total, Moscow Kremlin has 20 towers. And we don't include the Kutafia into this because it was not a Kremlin tower, basically. It was not considered one. You can see that the round towers are only on the sides of Kremlin, on the corners. It's done for the defense. Everything is done for the defense in Kremlin. And it's again for the better observation, better angle. Let's talk a bit about the things which we are going to see today. Just briefly discuss our itinerary. We will go through the Trinity Tower and enter the Kremlin fortress. Actually, a few words about what is Kremlin in Russian. If you've been on our tours, you probably already know about it. Kremlin in Russian means the fortress. It's easy. And any medieval city which still exists in Russia will have its own Kremlin. It can be just the ground wall, or it can be the fortress with the walls, but it will be considered the main part of the town in the former times. So our Kremlin actually dates back to 1147, that's the date of the first mentioning of Moscow in the manuscripts and the letter from the establisher Yuri Dolgoruki to his brother. He said, come to Moscow. And he built the Kremlin. It was for 10 years. In 10 years, the fortress was finished. Why so fast? Because it was wooden Kremlin. And we will show you how probably it looked. No one knows how. There were no pictures left, but just slightly briefly, if we try to imagine, that's the Kremlin of Dolgoruki times. And the interesting story is how he chosen the land, why he chosen this particular spot. Actually, the story tells that he was walking, he was going near the area, near the future Moscow, and he was just passing by. He needed to stop for rest. This land already belonged to someone. It was the boyar. His name was Stepan Kuchka. And Yuri Dolgoruki decided to stop for a while to have a rest, while Kuchka didn't let him. It was quite bad behavior. And then Yuri Dolgoruki decided that the man deserved the punishment, and he killed him and took the land. That's one side of the story. And another side of the story is telling us that actually Yuri Dolgoruki understood the future prosperity of the land, because it's the very good spot, just surrounded by the natural moats, natural rivers. And he wanted this land, basically. So that's how Moscow started. Now you know that we are very old, very medieval city from 1147. We are now going to go back to our maps and finally to enter the Kremlin. We walked through, it was quite fast. We will come back a bit to the very beginning of the Kremlin, just to have a look from here. You see, now we are at the territory of the Kremlin, and it's interesting that you have the zebra crossing here, because Kremlin is the very important part of our city, politically and culturally, because it's also the working office of the president. That's why everywhere on every corner you have guards. You can only walk through the special lines. You are not allowed to go somewhere here, because you will be first, they will start whistling, and then they will make you go back to where you're allowed. If we just look around, you can see here lots of barrels, and they are laying, they don't have the postament. That's because they are trophies. It's the trophy from Napoleon, already mentioned, who came here to Kremlin when it was completely empty. He just took it over without any resistance. And then the problem was the winter. It was so cold that actually he couldn't stay here. City was empty without any wood, any supplies, any food, nothing. So he had to leave. But before that, of course, he wanted to destroy several things. We'll talk about it later when we visit the cathedrals. That's also a part of our program for today. And this building here, actually, it has the cannons for the special reason. It was always the first armory. That's where Peter the Great, it was constructed in his time. He wanted to store the weapons, but also to store the trophies. That's why they're all around it. Nowadays, Kremlin has the military academy, which is also located here, and the special Kremlin regiment. These are the guards who are serving to our president and to Kremlin. They also live here. Now we're going to have a look on the other side. You can see that Kremlin has lots of guards, you already know, lots of the police, so they are all around here. And also some interesting things from the medieval time. So the architecture in Kremlin, it's amazing. It has, for example, you see in front of here, the building from the middle of the 20th century, but just behind it, it will load and we will see the building from the medieval times. It's, let's first talk about the one that we see in front, the concrete building from the 1960s. Some historians are telling that That's the particular building that made UNESCO unleashed Kremlin. Actually, it's not exactly the truth. This building is from the 1962, and UNESCO actually listed Kremlin a bit later, but without this building, only particular parts of the historic buildings. But still, the building looks quite complicated and not really suitable to the general architecture of the beautiful spires and domes of the churches. Why is it here, and what does it mean? What is special about it? Actually, for the art historians, this is one of the favorite buildings in Moscow because it's really interesting to analyze it. When Khrushchev came to power, it was after Stalin. He wanted to show people that he is quite open. He doesn't want to do the same mistakes that Stalin did. And he said that my politics will be transparent. You can see everything that I want to do. You can follow the things that I'm doing and see what it leads. And that's why he used a lot of glass. You can see here, it's the absolutely transparent building. It was the Congress place for the Communist Party. That's where basically they were meeting. So how many people it could fit? Actually, this one is for 6,000 people, 6,000 members of the party. And the building, the part of it that you see, it's not the entire building. There are 5 more floors, around 14 meters, which are going down, underground levels. Why they were done? Because the Kremlin has the very special rule that nothing should be taller than the dominating Ivan the Great bell tower. It was a very strict condition to keep it as it was. You can see that they used not a lot of decorations. They didn't want to make it beautiful. They just wanted to make it just functional. That's the main idea of the brutalist style. Basically, that's the brutalist style that was developing in the 60s and further with Khrushchev and Brezhnev times. And finally, our picture loaded. So you can see here the Pink Palace behind. This Pink Palace, it's called Poteshny. So if you translate it from Russian, means fun. And actually, it was made to have fun, to have the balls, to have the feedings and the feasts. So this was all done for the boyards who were part of the Kremlin and the royals to celebrate different events. But we are going to mention this building for another reason. When the communists came here, they needed to live somewhere. So as you know, for a long time, the capital was St. Petersburg. And in 1917, actually, they decided to change it back to Moscow. There were some reasons to do it. First, that they were afraid of the very strong Petersburg Navy that could act against them. So they needed some safe place, but also they wanted to reject the past, to reject the imperial ideals of the Winter Palace, for example. So they couldn't just imagine themselves being in the Winter Palace. So when they came here, they needed to live somewhere. And as most of the buildings were in very bad condition after the fights, they have chosen this building, the yellow one and the pink one. And Stalin also lived here with his family for the very short period, but right here in the pink building. And what happened there was also a very sad event that his wife, Nadezhda Aliluyeva, was found dead one day, and no one knows what really happened to her. So some people blame Stalin, some people say that it was his fault and they were quarreling the previous day, but we don't know for sure. We just know that his daughter, Svetlana, she just escaped. She was living in the US for a long time and she didn't want to stay in the USSR. So that may tell us something. A few more words about this building. So I've told you that it's for 6,000 seats. And actually the interesting thing is that originally it was for 4,000 seats, but when the delegation of the architect Pasokhin went to China, Mao actually showed them that they had a new conference hall for 10,000 people. And Russians were really envying. They said we need to do something also that important and that big. And now it can fit 6,000 people. This is also the place where every year we have the Christmas tree performance for the kids. It's called the Yolka, the tree performance. And kids come there and they see Grandfather Frost. I will show you the picture of how it looks. Here we are, that's inside. You can see that only kids are allowed there. The parents are waiting outside and they have the huge performance party and different games. So that's a dream for everyone. And the interesting thing is that when they come outside, parents somehow need to pick them. And what they do is that they put kids in line, go around the main Christmas tree of Moscow, and the parents are just grabbing them from this line. Like you can compare it to the airport luggage. And basically they are just grabbing their kids. So some people are joking that some kids who will be left and not picked by their parents could become president if they stay in Kremlin. Now we are back and we will continue our walk, just moving closer to the area where our president works. The Kremlin that you can see now, it's a bit changed from the Kremlin that was here originally, because lots and lots of buildings were destroyed. 2 monasteries, then also the palaces, the places where the government was located, and the buildings which were done in the Soviet time as well. For example, the one yellow that you can see right here, it's already gone because this map is from 2012. So the things have changed since then. We will do a little walk around here. Wow, we are walking on the zone where we are now allowed to do it when you're just a tourist, because we are right on the road. So we'll come closer to the building, which is called Senate. It's over there. Maybe it will be better to look from the viewpoint. Yeah, perfect. You can see the building with a round dome here. We will move closer to it on our helicopter. And you can see now we are on the Red Square. That's the Senate building. And you can see that there is a kind of flag on top of it here, but in fact, it's not a flag. I will a bit zoom it. It's not a flag, it's called Standard. So more like a flagstaff. And it's the symbol of the president. Basically, wherever president goes, he must put this flagstaff on top of the building where he is. So the original of it, it's in his office inside of the Kremlin. And this is just a copy. So there is also a copy of this on the car that he is using to go to work. I will show you closer what exactly is there. Here we are. You can see the St. George killing the dragon on one of the domes, and then the flagstaff on the other dome. So the difference between flagstaff and the flag is basically that it also has the double-headed eagle, the coat of arms of Russia. But St. George is basically the patron of Moscow. So those of you who are from Great Britain probably now are thinking, but it's the patron of Britain after all, and also patron of Moscow. So yeah, we all have him as a patron. And another thing is that the flag stuff always has, you see the holder here, so it's like a flag root. And this thing always has the engraving of the current president, name and surname. So now probably this one has Vladimir Putin. And it hasn't changed a lot since 2000. And now we're going back to see the Senate from our viewpoint. Yeah, today we are not covering the Red Square, we are just inside of the fortress of Kremlin. But if you want, write us in comments if it's interesting for you to do the Red Square and the rest of the center of Moscow, we will be glad to do it. So yeah, send us your suggestions, and the best ones we will choose and do more lives if you like the style. By the way, I forgot to tell you that we have this channel. It's called Explained. So it's about Russia in general, Russian culture. And we try to put more of the educational and cultural content there. So if you like it, also subscribe. That will be perfect. Coming back to the Kremlin. And now we are following the beautiful summer day and going right to the cathedral square. But before, we will have a look at this, you see, beautiful cannon here. Always lots of tourists here taking pictures, but we will use the opportunity to observe it from here. You can see that this is the huge cannon, and it's very scary. Imagine the enemies who are just imagining this firing into their walls, into them, destroying the entire army. But there is one little thing about this cannon, that it never fired a ball. It's actually, it can do it. So it's proved that it has the capacity. It's not just a toy or not just a decoration. It can be active. The only problem is it's that if you put the balls like this, it will be too heavy and you need the entire equipment to carry it with you to the battlefield, and it's impossible. It's too long. And the balls that you can see here, actually they are fake. They are inside, they don't have any metal. So if they did, their weight will be around 1 ton, which is quite heavy. And the cannon itself, it was produced at the time of the son of Ivan the Terrible, Fyodor Yanovich. So he was really scared of the enemies who at that time, the Polish wanted to go and capture the Moscow, then the Mongolians were from another side. So actually the enemies were from all of the sides, and he needed to invent something that would scare them. Of course, the gossip told that this weapon is the best in the world. It's actually the biggest cannon in the world. And of course, enemies, they understood that maybe not now. We don't have to go to Moscow now because they have this amazing weapon. So there was the expertise that actually proved that it wasn't used. There are no traces of the ball firing here. So we can tell that it's just a decoration after all. When they were moving it, it was really hard. Imagine how heavy it is. When they were moving it, they used 200 horses. Imagine. So probably it's not very convenient during the fight. It's quite a tough task to move it around. This part of the Kremlin has also another Tsar, but not the cannon, the bell, Tsar bell. It's located here. Yeah, you can see it's like a sister of the Tsar cannon, a huge bell, actually one of the biggest in the world, but not the biggest. If you know, write us in the comments which country has the biggest one. And this is a bit younger than the Tsar cannon. This is the time of Anna Ivanovna. She was the niece of Peter the Great, and we'll have a look at her also from that side. Right here. She was one of the earliest empresses of Russia, because before it was only the male who could inherit the power and the ability to rule. But later, when Peter the Great died, there were no males left. So they had to ask this lady to come to Russia actually, she was from Europe. She was not staying in Russia. And that's why people actually didn't like her. When she came, the nobility wanted to use her and actually to rule on their own, with using her as the face of the country. But it didn't work. She just turned all of the conditions that they made her sign. She said, no, I'm not listening to you. Now I'm the empress. I'm deciding what to do. And to prove her powers, she actually wanted to do this hugest bell in the world. So what she did, she collected the metal from the previous bell. It was done by Alexei Mikhailovich, and it was located right here in Ivan the Great Bell Tower, on that second part of it, the second floor. What she did, she made the masters put a lot of the furnaces here, and basically it took them a while to create this bell. Imagine what you need to create the bell. You need the first ceramic bases, then you need the second ceramic bases, and all of them need to be fired with a temperature of around 2000 degrees. Then you have to pour the liquid metal inside, and the ceramic should be like a very stable one, not to crack when the liquid is being poured. Basically, it was a very, very hard task. And they failed. For the first time, they failed. And the master, it was very interesting. So his name is Matori. He died because he was so scared that it didn't work. Then his son had to continue because only he knew the recipe for the metal. You need to have a combination of silver, of gold, of bronze. So it's a very difficult process. And basically, he managed to do it. But the problem was that when they were doing the engraving, this beautiful portrait of Anna Yanovna, the Moscow fire started. It had nothing to do with the process of making the cannon. But the people got so scared that this precious thing will break again that they started pouring water on it. And the problem was that you never do this while it's still hot, because the dramatic change of the temperature can basically break it much faster than if it just cools gradually. So that's what happened here. The huge piece fell out of it. You can see it here. People love taking pictures with it. Here we are. This little piece, it's 11 tons. So imagine how huge the cannon is in general. The problem with this, the bell is really huge in general. The problem with it is when it was here, in this huge hole that they were digging specifically to make it, they couldn't lift it up. It was too heavy. They had no idea of how to do it. And for 100 years, it was placed there in the middle of the square. And no one knew what to do with it. And only a century later, basically, the person came from St. Petersburg, Montferrand, who managed to create a special construction to lift it, at least here, to the postament and to show it to the people. So the person that Anna Yanovna actually put in front, you see this man here, this is Alexei Mikhailovich. The bell that he created, that he commissioned, Anna Yanovna actually remelted to use for her new bell. Now we are going, you see the beautiful cathedrals in front, we are going basically to have a look at the cathedral square. Yeah, all of you probably know the Red Square, the name, but there is the more central point than the Red Square. It's the cathedral square. You see how many different cathedrals are around? And all of them look differently, and they had different purposes in the time of the royals. For example, the one that you see here, it's the main one in front of us. It's the cathedral for the coronations. Also, there were cathedrals for the marriages, like the one with the golden dome, like lots of golden domes here, and the one with seashells, it's actually the cemetery, the place where the royals are buried. So we are going to enter the cathedrals and to have a look around. We'll do it thanks to the museums of Kremlin. So this one is called Assumption Cathedral. We are now inside, and you see that the structure of it resembles you a bit of the Byzantium, because this style is called the Russian Byzantium style. So basically, it has the 6-column structure. And most of the cathedrals in Russia, when you go inside, they look almost exactly the same in the matter of design and the matter of what scenes and what frescoes are depicted on which part of the cathedral. This is the hierarchy. This is actually the canon that they used. And we will have a look here at the west portal. This is the place where people are entering and exiting from. And you can see that always, every cathedral will have the scene of the Last Judgment here. You can see that on one side here, so it's my right side. This is the hell, actually we call it the hyena on fire. And this is you see here, the snake. So this is the evil. And on that side, these are the people waiting for the Christ judgment. Adam and Eve are in the first row, of course. So when we walk around the cathedral, we can see here the tombs. Basically, they are just the gravestones. The tombs are underground because at the Last Judgment, people need to raise from the graves. And in order to do that, they need to be buried properly. And you can see here lots and lots of graves. Very special people are buried here. These are the patriarchs. Patriarch is the Pope of the Russian Church, the entire Russian Church, and also the metropolits. So basically, these are those people who are heads of the huge cities, the churches of the huge cities. They have a bit of the different status in the church. And what the other interesting thing about this particular cathedral is that you can see that normally people stand in the Orthodox Church. It's the matter of respect to God. So during the service, you don't have any seats. These are just the museum seats. Normally you stand. But some people can sit. It's the Patriarch himself. That's why you can see here the seat made of stone. It was originally done for the Patriarch to be praying here. But also we have the wooden one on that side. This was for the emperor himself, for the Tsar originally. And another one for the Tsaritsa, for the female ruler. We will talk about them later. Before we will have a look at the oldest icon that is here. Come closer here. Yes, you see the icons now are on the walls. Originally, they were mainly in the altar. So people were praying, looking at the altar, which is the center of the church. That's where the prayers happen normally. And you may ask me the question, why so many paintings? Why the frescoes are everywhere? The idea is that maybe you've been to the Gothic cathedrals as well. And you know that all of the art, it's basically for learning the Bible, learning the history, and for the people who couldn't read. That's why here, all of the scenes from all of the testaments are actually presented as images, because Russian people couldn't read these days. The same with the Gothic stained glasses. Also, just the reading as a comic book of the history of God. But I want to show you a very unique icon here. You think this is also St. George. It's a very old icon. It dates back, you see it says 11th century. So it's 11th, 12th century. And it was done in Novgorod. Novgorod was one of the first capitals before Moscow was established. And most of the precious icons are coming from there. It has the typical Byzantium style with a little bit of the local perspective. But this icon is very interesting for two reasons. First is that you can see the St. George here is not killing the dragon. He's just looking as the saints that how we are used to see them. And another thing is that this icon is double-sided. If we look on the other side of it, basically there is the image of Mary. You can see it right here. You see that we call this type of Mary Odigitria. And the interesting thing about it is that you can see that part of the painting is uncovered. And this is the oldest part. And the newest part basically was done a bit later. They decided to keep it because they don't know what is under it. Maybe it's in good condition, maybe it's bad condition. So for the art historians and the restaurators, it's always a big question whether to clean the icon till the first layer, which was done earlier, maybe it's 11th century, maybe it's 12th century, or to keep the latest version, which may be up to 19th or 20th century even, but this particular one is 17th century. So the question is, like, what is more precious? The older, it may be rare, or the newer, it also may be rare. That's why they decided to keep it double. So one part like super old, the medieval, and one part a bit later years. And you can see that also the icons now, it's just wood and tempera, and basically there is no cover on top. But in Russian church, we always had the special cover, which is called oklad. And you can see here what happened to the oklads. This is the Soviet time. In the Soviet time, the churches actually were surviving, but most of them were closed. And people were just taking the golden or silver coverings. they were selling them or they were just melting them and using them for money, basically. So that's why most of the icons nowadays in the churches, they have the new ones. The old ones are rarely protected. The idea of this was to cover everything except the hand and the face. So the hand is blessing you and the face that you can talk to, because for Russians, for the Orthodox, actually the image is very important. The image is a representation of the saint, and by viewing it, it's possible to talk to the saint and actually to have the communication. That's why everything which is covered with the metal, it's the inner world that we cannot see. We can only see the face. Going back to the church, and I wanted to show you also closer to the altar. Yeah, that's the altar door. That's where priest is coming and bringing the things for the Eucharist. It's done during the prayer. And we will see later that every church that we will visit has the same structure of the altars. You have the door, which is the entrance to the paradise. You have the Christ judging us. And near the Christ, the second icon on the side always is the main icon of the cathedral. So that's the icon of the Dormition of Mary. Actually, it's the Assumption. So that actually gave the name to the cathedral itself, Assumption Cathedral. You can see that then you will have the scenes with all of the Mary and Joseph, and then the pupils of Christ and archangels. So that's the typical way to represent icons in the altar. Now we are going to see closer the throne of Ivan the Terrible. This cathedral is main one because it was the coronations that happened here. So here we have this amazingly beautiful seat. It's called the place for the prayer for the Tsar. And this one was particularly made for Ivan the Terrible after his super successful conquering of Kazan. And that's why we don't see it clearly here, but I will show you the picture. Under the wooden structure, there are also animals. You can see them right here. Yeah, you can see them closer, like that. That's the throne of Monomach, we call it, and I will move this a bit. Yeah, you can see the animals here. And basically, these are the hyena, lion. So these are all of the representation of the Kazan tsardoms, basically princedoms that Ivan managed to conquer. And you can see also the scenes of how he went to Kazan, which was the Muslim state, and how he was slightly conquering it. So this is the very careful work. You see everything is wood cut, which is quite elaborate. Don't need this anymore. So now coming back to the cathedral. I think that we are finished with this one. Just like a few more glimpses into the altar. And as every human that visited this cathedral, we will exit through the west part of the portal. So normally in the Russian churches, you always have the altar facing east and the exit and entrance facing west. But the royals, you see this door over here, the royals entered from there. It was the shortcut for them because the crowd was meeting them. That's why they were entering through another door. And yes, looking at the scenes of the paradise and hell, people were making the choice of how they will live the next day, praying and exiting back to the main square, where we are now. So now we are back. We are going to have a look here at the lots and lots of beautiful domes. You can see we'll come closer. Yeah, here we are. This was the Tsarina's palace. Basically, all of this small domes, they are separate churches. You can see that they have half moon here, right under the cross. This is a very interesting thing because some people are saying, why is it here? It seems like it's a mosque probably, but it's not. It's just the feminine symbol. So in Orthodox churches, now it's not so clear anymore because the rules changed a bit, but in the medieval time, this always said that the main saint of the church, it's the woman. So basically, if it was dedicated to Catherine, etc., they always had the half moon just under the cross. And because it was the Tsarina's palace, also the same symbolism. Now we are standing near this beautiful white building. It's called the faceted palace. Basically, the facets are these pricks here, which have the 8 sides. So all of the stones, they signify that someone important is living here. Basically, this was one of the first buildings where the royals lived. And they were meeting the delegations here, creating different feasts and festivals. So that was a very important place. And basically, if you come here during the inauguration of our president, he's also coming right through the stairs to congratulate everybody and to actually see the Kremlin regiment passing by and giving their respect to him. I will show you the picture of how it all looks. Here we are. Mr. President coming down the faceted palace and the guards looking at him and showing their respect. Sometimes it's possible to watch this inauguration ceremony online. So yeah, the faceted palace is actually enclosed to the next building, which is the Grand Kremlin Palace. Now, while we are standing here, I want to show you the beautiful tower. It's called Ivan the Great Bell Tower. You can see it here. That's where the Tsar bell was supposed to be, basically on the second level of the bell tower. For a long time, it was the tallest building of Moscow. It's 80 meters now, and we will look from the bird eye view here. Actually, yeah, it's possible to observe everything from this tower. In the summer, you can climb on top of it. So we'll try to do it as well, just to determine where we are. Okay, here we are. Perfect. We will go right here. So that's the bell tower, and you can see Moscow from this view. It's just amazing. It seems like it's the tallest building, but now it's not. There were some of the changes. For example, you can see here Christ the Savior Cathedral. It's a bit taller. And also Stalin broke in the law by creating his famous 7 sisters. You can see the closest to us, sorry that I'm moving so fast. The closest to us is located over there. One more somewhere here. This is the famous skyscrapers of Stalin. So they are much taller than Ivan the Great Bell Tower. And the skyline is a bit spoiled because of that. But still, the view is amazing. You can see now how huge the changes are. So before here, we had another building. We had the monastery for the royal ladies. And there is a very funny story about Ivan the Great Bell Tower, that we had prince whose name was Ivan Kalita. So he was always carrying like a little money bag. And he, because here we had the monastery for women, some of them who wanted to get married, but they had no possessions, they were just coming into the monastery and praying for the good luck, for the good marriage. And when they were coming out of the monastery, Ivan Kalita, he was just throwing coins from the balcony here. And they thought that the god basically sent them this money to be able to marry properly. So that was like a good thing that he was doing. He was also just walking around and giving money to people, just like a very kind person. That's why people loved him a lot. You can see also that the cathedrals look so different. Some of them, they're more like a square form, some of them are round, some domes are huge, some are very tiny. The idea is that Kremlin itself It's the architecture from Italians, because our Tsars, they actually invited Italians to build it. All the walls that you can see here, so first it was wooden, it burned, and then at some point they decided to invite the good and skilled people who can help them to build the fortification. And they invited people from Italy. That's why the Kremlin towers, if you look at them closer, basically they really resemble the towers of the Sforza castle. I have a picture here prepared. If you've been to Italy, you probably remember this, Milan, and it looks exactly like Kremlin. And also the red brick here, so the same style. The only problem that our Kremlin, for a long time, it was painted white. And if you look at the old paintings, you can basically see the white Kremlin, like here, for example, the walls and the towers. So most of the historians are telling that original Kremlin with the red bricks, it wasn't painted for 2 centuries. And only in the 17th century, they started to do it for the very specific reason. Because of Kremlin being old, it had cracks. And they needed to put the white paint in order to actually like renovate it a little bit. That's why the white paint was kept there till the revolution time, 1917. And then they just had no money for that. They didn't understand the need. And slightly the white paint started to fade. That's why the walls that you see now, they are painted red, actually. The original bricks, they would be too old and they look quite outdated, of course. Now our plan is to go inside of the next cathedral. It will be the Cathedral of Archangel Michael. It's the patron of the royal family, and now this cathedral actually is the symmetry. If you look at it closer here, you can see the seashells. It's a very untypical thing for Russia. You know, we don't have sea, though we had no when we were the empire as well. And basically, at that time when it was built, it was a very unusual element. Actually, it was chosen because it was said that as the seashell can give you a pearl, Mary gave us Jesus. So that's like a little metaphoric, and that's why this was chosen. We will go inside to see how the tombs are located here. And we will use for that, again, the website of the Moscow Kremlin. It's a very interesting website. If you have free time, also go there. It's called kremlin.ru, and you can find a lot of information with the descriptions in English. So I recommend, if you're interested, you can read about different icons as well. Because we don't have time for everything. It would last for 5 hours, our tour. And now we are in the Archangel Michael's Cathedral. It's, again, very similar to the one that we saw before. In the structure as well, it also has 6 supports, so 4 of them are here. You can see 1 second is here, and 2 of them are behind the altar, because the part where we are now, it's only 2/3 of the entire cathedral. 1/3 is behind the altar, the area where no one is allowed to go, because it's the sacred area where only the priest can go during the prayer. And this is a cathedral which is famous for the tombs of 2 dynasties, actually. The first is the Rurikovich, which was from the earliest days till Ivan the Terrible, whose tomb is also here. I will show it to you today. And a bit of the Romanov family, but with Peter the Great, they were all buried in the Peter and Paul fortress, just with the several people buried in Moscow for a special reason. We are going to discuss it today as well. What you can see here, again, the gravestones, these are not the actual coffins. The coffins are underground again, because you can see here, people will raise from the graves. They will raise from the coffins, waiting for the Christ judgment, which is happening again right there. Every cathedral will be the same. And we are going to have a look at the several of the tombs, which I find very interesting. So first of them, it's basically the tomb of Tsarevich Dmitry. So you can see here, it's in Russian we call it raka. So basically it's not the gravestone, it's the actual relic of the saint. This is son of Ivan the Terrible, Dmitry. So he died when he was only 9 years old, and it was an accident. No one knows what happened to him, so he was stabbed somehow when he was playing with knives. This was like a game in the medieval time when kids were allowed to play with knives. And you can see here that a little boy is canonized, so he became a Russian saint. And basically this is a pilgrimage site where people can come and pray sometimes. But the cathedrals in Kremlin are not functioning as the cathedrals anymore. They are functioning as a museum. So you don't see a lot of pilgrims here. And also another interesting tomb, it's here, right here. It's the tomb of Peter II. So you know that Peter the Great was Peter I, and this is Peter II. It's his grandson. So he could have been a successor, and when he came to Moscow, he died, and he died of plague. For that reason, it was decided not to carry him all the way to Petersburg, not to spread the disease, which is very, very up to date nowadays. And basically he was buried right here. Around here, we have like a special structure of the cemetery. So all of the martyrs are buried on that side, all of the Romanov here, and the Rurikhovich family and the Tsars are buried on that side. We're going to look at one more, the Chernigovsky prince. Also, tomb is here. So this is actual sarcophagus, basically where the body is, because this man was canonized as he was killed. He's a martyr. But the question is, where is Ivan the Terrible? And I'm going to answer your question. We are going to go back and come closer to the altar. First, you see, some people are asking me how they get so much gold for the entire altar. You see this piece is huge, all the way up and with the gold. But actually it's not the gold, it's wood. All of these details are wood with a golden leaf. So basically they're just like a very narrow leaf which are covering the wooden carving. The carving is quite amazing. You can see the grapes here, which is blood of Christ. And again, you have the Christ judging, and icon here. It's the main icon of the church. It's Archangel Michael. But we are here for a special reason. We are going to have a look at Ivan the Terrible. Just turning here, these are also some of the relatives of his, the grandsons. And if we press right here, we appear in the very unique place. Basically, we are behind the altar. And you can see 3 of the tombs here. This is Ivan and 2 of his sons. One of them he killed. Basically, that's why we call him terrible, for several reasons. The first of them is that due to some of the historians, he killed his own son, which is not proved. The second thing is that he was married 7 times, and due to the Orthodox rules, you can only marry 3 times, which is also the breaking of the rule. And the one more thing is that Ivan was just a very violent man, and a lot of executions happened, a lot of them bloody wars with his time. Also one more reason to call him terrible. So behind the altar, no one is allowed, but somehow we appear to be here. When we are on our tours, we never go here. So when I discovered this option, I was really shocked. How can you do it? Now you can see how it works. So the priest has the additional entrance here. And normally you have the altar piece where he puts the bread and wine. And Ivan, why he's buried behind the altar? It's just a crazy thing, right? To be buried where no one is allowed. So it was his own will. And basically, because the space was limited in the cathedral, they needed to put some people in the positions which were not usual these days. Now we are going back to the cathedral. Here we also have Dmitry Donskoy buried, and no women, because women were buried in the monastery, which was destroyed in the Soviet time, unfortunately. So the remains which were found, they were actually reburied in this cathedral, but underground. So now they're all together, but you don't see the paintings with them here, things like that. Now we go back to the square. All right, yeah, here we are. So now we are going back to the square. And with the use of our panorama, we are going to have a look at the last cathedral that we are visiting today. Yeah, that's the actual monastery, where now it's just the empty square. So that's the main Spasskaya tower with the clock. And yeah, now you can enter only through one tower, but we can exit through 2 more different towers. And 4 of them were actually to be entered in the past. Now only one is used for tourists as an entrance, and one is used for the cars of the president. Before we go to the next cathedral, just a little story about the Kremlin stars. We go back here to the panorama, and let's have a look at the Kremlin star, just as we climbed to it. Well, better have a look at the map. Right here, to the Spasskaya tower. Oh, it's here. At night, you can see at night they are looking very beautiful. They have the ruby, which is very bright red color. And originally they were not like this. They were made of the Ural stones, basically in the Soviet time. But they got very dusty, and they decided just to leave the ruby because it's easier to clean. And originally in the monarchy time, they actually had double-headed eagles there. And the picture that I was showing you, it's the time when they decided to change them for this, you see, hammer and sickle here, for the communist stars. And what happened to double-headed eagles? You see, they were exposed on the square, and people could come and have a look at the fallen symbol of the monarchy. Like that. So the communist time was not easy. And now let's go to the last cathedral. Before we go there, let's have a look at it from outside. We are just turning, and we turn here. This is the Cathedral of Annunciation. That was a small church, basically only for the royals. We call it the home church, Domovaya in Russian. And it has a very interesting structure. This is the one which was not built by Italians. This is the amazing fact. This was built by Russian people from Pskov. These 2 were Italian built. For example, the oldest one here. This is the middle of the 15th century. And Aristotle Fioravanti, who was named Aristotle for his huge knowledge of the materials and architecture, because he was also an engineer. He built this after the failure of Russian architects. Why he was chosen, it's a very interesting thing, because Russians loved the Italian architects. They thought they are very skilled. And basically, when he came to Russia, some people say that he came for the special reason, that he was actually escaping from Italy. He needed the shelter. For what reason? Because first is that he made fake money, and Italy was searching for him to punish him. And the second, it's the legend, which is not proof, that he actually was the engineer who was moving the Leaning Towers. So he helped to fix them, and one of them fell. And basically for that, he needed to be punished as well. But it's just a legend, it's not proof. So when he came to Moscow, he knew the Kremlin very good. He knew all of the materials, what to use better. See, his structure is still standing. The interesting thing is that he wanted to go back to Italy. He really wanted to, but the Russian Tsar didn't let him. The reason was basically that this is the person, the foreigner, who knows the structure of the Kremlin, who knows all of the entrances, all of the fort posts. So if you let him outside, he can actually spread the information, which is not a very good thing for the empire and for the princedom. So he had to stay. Now we are ready to enter the beautiful Annunciation Cathedral, but before we do, you see, there is one more entrance. We have two, one staircase here, and one here. The reason for that, it's also very special. It's because Ivan the Terrible was expelled from the church for the reason that he married too many times. As I told you, you can only marry 3 times in the entire life. And what happened is that when the service was going on in the church, Ivan had to enter from the separate entrance. And there were more churches on the upper floor where you have the domes, which were actually used, and to enter them you needed to go from the upper level. There were stairs leading especially there. And when Napoleon troops came, they were destroying everything, but they didn't find this place. They didn't know how to get there. That's why the icons there, which were there, all of the things for the services, they were kept in a very good condition. So I will show you the picture how Napoleon troops were dealing with the cathedrals. You see, stable. They were just taking all the gold, all the silver, destroying things, drinking, cooking inside of the churches, which actually spoiled a lot the frescoes. And they needed to renovate them. That's why the frescoes that you see nowadays are not the same that were originally from the middle of 15th century. Now we go back and finally enter the Annunciation Cathedral. And we are inside. Now we will, we appeared right in front of the altar, but we will start from the main gallery. This is called gallery because you can see lots of windows here. This is also the Italian influence, because in Italy, the churches have this special gallery for the walks during the warm times when people are staying in the main room for prayer. They need to go outside to breathe fresh air. But in Russia, it's the very hard case. Imagine, these windows didn't exist. It was super cold to walk around here. And at some point, they needed to close the windows somehow to make the area warmer. But the gallery is still here. It's not the place for the prayer. It's not where the prayer is actually happening, but just a place to go around to enter the main praying hall. My favorite detail here is this amazing whale. Yes, that's how in medieval time people thought whales looked. And I love this fresco because you can see that in one picture, you actually have several scenes. It's different timing. So you can see here, it's Iona, who's from the boat. Then the whale is actually, like eating him. And then the whale is releasing him, and he's here telling the Sodom about the future events. That's how the medieval masters could put lots of the time periods of the story at the same picture, which is quite an amazing skill. I don't know if anyone from contemporary art is doing it, except of the comic books. And now it's time to go to see the altar. We're coming here. And we are standing in front of the altar. Again, you have the Annunciation scene. And amazing, if you look at the floor here, this floor, legend says, was brought here from Vladimir, which is one of the medieval towns of Russia. And to Vladimir, this floor was brought from Byzantium. So the story tells that probably this can be the leftover of Byzantine Empire. We don't know exactly how it is. And this part of the iconostasis, it's said to be painted, to be done by the pupils of Andrei Rublev. If you know this famous movie by Tarkovsky, Andrei Rublev, it's actually the monk who was silent, who didn't speak, and his only way to express himself was through the art. And his style is a very special style for Russia, which combines both Byzantine but also very, very Russian features. That's why it's the most famous icon artist, like the religious artist in the entire Russia. And the interesting thing is that he didn't sign his work. So obviously you don't sign their religious work because it's made for God. And now it's really hard to identify whether it's him or not. So we have only several of the professionals who can really tell that that's exactly him. And you can see here, these are the presents from the different Orthodox churches from all around the world. This, for example, is the reliquarium, where we have the relics from most of the famous saints of both Orthodox and Catholic churches. This is the gift from the Greek Orthodox. And the scenes here, you can see the painting is quite new. This is the beginning of the 20th century, actually. So a bit different from the original. And also the pupils of Rublev. This is the style that you can see in front. This area was used to be for the baptizing as well. So now when we are done with the cathedral here, actually, tell how to feel if you have any questions. Nikita will be answering them. Our plan now is to go back and have a little walk through the garden of the Kremlin. Because Kremlin has also the very, very beautiful area of the garden. It's called Tainitsky. Basically in Russian, Taina, it's a mystery garden. And now we are crossing here and you can see this tower, which is hiding in the bushes. This is basically the Tainitskaya tower. And it really has the mystery because if you go inside of this tower, actually there is a secret passage which is leading from here to the other side of the river. In case if the invasion happened, the royals and guards could escape without enemies knowing about it. And our plan is just to go here through the garden. And actually in the garden, they have apples. Sometimes me and my tourists were eating them, cleaning first and then eating, of course. And we stop here normally to see the helipads because let's have a look from our viewpoint. We will switch to the daytime and our map, it will be easier to see them. Somewhere from here, this is some basil. Probably this will be the best spot. Let me check. We'll just turn it here. Yeah, you see these two circles with the letter H. This is where the helicopters are coming, usually from the water, because some people said that this may be destroying the beautiful architecture. I will put the charger because my laptop is going out of charge. Yeah, perfect. So you see the helipads here, the helicopters coming from the water, always two of them. First, one lands, then the second. So for a long time, I thought it's Putin landing here. But actually, recently, I've listened to another guide who said that probably it's not Putin because it's too dangerous to fly. So he only comes by his car. And it's a lot of security here. And basically, you can never see who is exiting from the helicopters. You can never see the cars coming and picking people. And you don't understand how they get from here to the main Senate building, which is also not obvious. Some people are saying that there is the secret metro that the government people may use to go from one side to another and without using car or helicopter, which makes life easier. And actually, we don't know whether it's true or not, but we can prove that basically there is a line of the metro which connects Kremlin here and the presidential administration building, which is on the Varvarka. So basically just near the Zaryadye Park. I'm pointing to it now. So it's around maybe 2 kilometers maximum. And I have a picture that can prove to you that it really exists. When I've been to the bunker, it's called Bunker 703, you see here. So in this bunker, they have this map of all of the Soviet nuclear war protection bunkers. And this was used during Cold War, obviously. You see Kremlin here, And that is the metro line in black color. It connects several bunkers and then the blue line as well. So you can, that's the proof that now it's outdated. So probably this information is declassified because there is no need to keep it like secret. But yeah, the metro system in Moscow, it's like the entire bunker system that was used during Cold War. And in case of something, people could easily escape from the Kremlin to the blue line, and from the blue line anywhere they want outside of Moscow, far from the nuclear attack, for example. That's how Moscow is built. A very interesting city. And also there is one more legend about this garden. Yeah, here it is. Like all of this part is the beautiful apple trees. So some people are saying that somewhere here under this hill, there is the famous library of Ivan the Terrible that he got from his grandma, who was Sofia Paleolog, the Byzantine princess. And she collected lots and lots of books from Byzantium, from all of the countries that it had the trade connections with. So probably Ivan had something like that. And no one knew where it was, only the special selected people, and he was hiding it somewhere. Now people don't know where it is. And it's still like a huge detective task to find it. In this beautiful garden, there is also one interesting thing. It's the famous tree. The tree which was put here by Yuri Gagarin. Here it is. Yeah, here it is, right where the people are sitting on the bench. We just walk past. Yeah, here it is. You can see that if we zoom a bit, this is the tree that Gagarin actually put here. So this is the tree which is more than 60 years old now, as in, yeah, 61 he did his flight, and then the tree was put in here. So if you are in Kremlin, definitely come here and you will know the secret of the garden. Our next spot is a bit outside of the garden. We are going to have a look at the famous Kremlin Palace. See, this is the beautiful structure right here. And it's done in the Byzantium Russian style. I would say that it's quite classical, looks more like Venice as well, but you have the typical features of kokoshniks here, and you have these Byzantine windows, which are more or less combined together by the famous architect Constantin Thon. And what is interesting that you see so many floors here. In fact, it's only two. One here, the first floor, and one here, which is the big hall for the receptions, for the different festivities. And that's where the president is accepting the guests. This is for the formal presidential meetings. And that's where the inauguration happened as well. If the president is in the Kremlin, they always lift up the flag here, but not the flag, the standard that I've already explained to you with the special symbol of the president. And the next building is the famous armory. By the way, we are planning to do the excursion to the armory, so write us in the comments if you're interested in that as well. And which format do you like more? So online excursion or more like presentation? We will think how we can do it the best way. So in the armory, we have all of the famous things like Fabergé X, the famous Monomarch cap, the dresses from the emperors. So I will show you Monomarch cap because it's the interesting piece that people adore, and always this thing was like a big hype about it. They were thinking where it came from, who gave it. People were thinking that maybe it's actually coming from the Byzantium, but it appeared to be not exactly like that. So here is the cap. And you can see that the fur was added later, and a bit of the like decorative parts was also added. This hat was used for the coronations. So basically, Ivan the Terrible and the rest of the Tsars and emperors, when they were coronated, it was always happening in the Kremlin. Even if the capital was moved to St. Petersburg, it actually didn't matter. they still had to come here, because here was the also the religious part of Moscow. And this the hat that they got coronated with. In the armor, you have lots of things like the weapons and the coronation dresses as well, for example, of Catherine the Great. Now we are going back, and yeah, I think it's almost 1.5 hours that we are talking to you, so probably you got a bit tired and hungry and whatever, and we will be coming to an end, slightly concluding, probably from the distance here. So we walked through the Kremlin, and one more interesting thing that I want to show you before we stop is actually that when the Soviet government came to the Kremlin, they were eating caviar. That's like literally, they were eating red caviar. The reason for that was that normally in Russia, the caviar was the thing that they exported. So the black caviar was enough for the locals, and the red caviar was always exported to Europe and the rest of the world. And the thing is that basically this caviar was like a leftover. And who would they give it to? They gave it to Lenin, Trotsky, and all the people who were supporting Lenin and living here. That's why Lenin was eating caviar being inside of the Kremlin. It's like 100% proved thing. So now when we walk through the entire Kremlin, we will have a look at the Moscow River and at the Moscow in general. You can see that the red squares here, it has nothing to do with Kremlin. It was always the marketplace. And now we have the GUM, which is the biggest store of Moscow and of Russia in general. And just a few more things about the Moscow in general. So that this Kremlin part that we see now, it's 3 times bigger than the original Kremlin. So it gradually moved through the time, it gradually spread through the time, reflecting all of the things that happened in our history. And basically, that's the heart of Moscow that we just walked through. That's the place that had the main events happening, all of the tsars, all of the people who were coming here, they were influencing our history. And I hope that you liked this tour. Leave us your comments about the questions or the ideas that you have for the future tours. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, so you will be posting lots of videos about Dostoevsky. It's the next one that is coming, about Russian literature, music, and all of the cultural aspects. That's why basically, like, we will be glad to answer all the questions you have and to spread Russian culture around. So thank you for watching. And yeah, now we are probably stopping. If this translation will be available for 24 more hours, and we will decide whether we stop it or not. All of the cultural aspects. That's why basically